I'm the National President of the Australian Society for Defence Engineering, which is a technical society of engineers Australia. And I've had a long background in defence. I graduated in mechanical engineering from UWA and joined what is now Defence. And for many, many years I've worked in the defence industry program side of defence, both inside defence itself, and then I spent some time as a consultant and assisting companies in bidding for defence contracts and focusing mainly on their industry program, their industry capability statements. And so that background has been very useful for me to be active in the Australian Society for Defence Engineering and engaging with speakers and so on. And that's what we do. I mentioned that I graduated and I went to work for what was then the Weapons Research Establishment in Salisbury in South Australia, which was a wonderful place for a young engineer to work because it was involved with some of the remnants of the Blue Streak missile program, for instance, and some of the other activities at Woomera. And that gave me a good background, a technical background, and in engineering and particularly in the aerospace sector. And then I had a short stint with CSIRO before joining Industry Development Branch in the Department of Defence in Adelaide. And that had the role of developing and sustaining Australian industry capabilities, particularly in South Australia, but also we looked at Western Australia. And from there I joined the F-18 project and was the Industry Programs Officer for the F-18 project, and had 3 years in Washington DC working with the project office and the US Navy, and also a lot with the US industry, the companies that were involved in that program in securing industry activities for Australian companies. After that I went back to Canberra, had a stint with the Defence Department in Canberra before being posted to London as the Council of Defence Industry. And again I was there to help promote Australian industry to UK and continental Europe as partners, and assisted with that, and also informed the companies there of the opportunities for doing work in Australia in defence. And so it was a two-way exchange. When I came back I worked as Director Industry Programs in Navy and was involved with the tendering and evaluation of tenders for some of Navy's projects at that time, like the hydrographic ships, for example, the Minehunter coastals. Then went out and did some consulting, and again I was involved with Australia's defence industry in preparing industry capability plans, and then I finished that and went back for a short time into defence in the industry policy division, where I was working on some of the industry policy issues. I've been president now for about 4 years, took over from Doug Rosa, who was also very heavily involved with industry, and Doug was also president for 4 years. And in that time we've run quite a number of different programs. I'm particularly proud of a couple of the defence engineering conferences that we ran. When Doug was president we ran a few, and they were very successful, I think, in promoting defence engineering to a wide audience of defence engineers and others drawn from both inside defence and industry. Yes, the Australian Society for Defence Engineering is open for membership to anyone who has an interest in defence engineering. A lot of our members are also members of Engineers Australia, but we have members who aren't and perhaps don't qualify for membership of Engineers Australia, but still have a real interest in defence engineering subjects, and they're certainly welcome to join us, and we're always looking for members who have that sort of interest. So that's our membership. We have just under 200 members Australia-wide, and we have chapters in each of the Australian states except for Tasmania and the Northern Territory. And so we're trying to build up our chapter here in Western Australia and also in South Australia, where there's an awful lot of defence engineering going on, as you know, with the projects that are now in the pipeline and are currently underway. So much defence engineering, we really think that we need to build up the chapters, particularly in those two states. And we're looking to grow that membership base, and we think that there's plenty of scope to do that with the amount of defence engineering that's taking place. Well, one of the activities that is almost a flagship activity, I guess, for us has been what started out as a collaborative venture between ourselves and the Defence Science and Technology Organisation, now the Defence Science and Technology Group, and Dr. Alex Zielinski, the Chief Defence Scientist, and ASDE have got together to run a series of lectures given by the recipient of the Minister's Award. And the Minister's Award is given to an outstanding scientist or engineer inside the DSTO or DSTG, who would then be able to have an opportunity to present on their research topic. And so we've run a number of these lectures over the last few years now, a series of lectures, and they've been very well attended. They're open to the general public, and the ones here in Western Australia and Perth in particular have been held at Curtin University, and we've attracted audiences of over 100, so that's been quite a flagship for us. All of what we do is aimed at continuing professional development of our members and members of Engineers Australia. And by that I mean that engineers, professional engineers, are required to maintain their, if they have chartered status, they have to do a certain amount of continuing professional development each year, and the presentations and other activities that ASDE runs qualifies them to do that. They participate in our activities and earn the CPD points, which allow them to maintain their chartered status. So that's very important to the members and to Engineers Australia. Well, with the amount of defence engineering required on these big projects, there's a huge opportunity for engineers to move into those areas, and I would hope that the overseas primes will tap into Australia's defence engineering talent and offer them opportunities through the subcontractors that they engage here in Australia, and possibly even taking engineers from Australia to their offices overseas and getting the Australian engineers to work side by side with their own engineers, and in that way participate directly in the very early stages of the project, and also gain the skills, the technology and the knowledge of the systems through that design work, and also the project planning work, which they then bring back to Australia. So great opportunities and exciting work. And I think this is a point that is perhaps not widely understood. A lot of engineers have been employed in the past in the mining industry, but defence offers a different career path, and from a technology point of view, very different and very challenging technologies. And I'm sure that there are a lot of engineers who relish that challenge and are attracted to that, and hence would find very satisfying work in defence industry. So I think that the future is looking very bright for engineers in Australia. A lot of the projects will require specialist knowledge and skills that are not readily available. You can think of very complex systems such as, for example, combat systems on board submarines, or some of the engine control systems and other control systems on board, and they will be very specialised and present challenges in terms of getting engineers who have the right skill sets or are able to develop those skill sets to be able to provide the engineering services that are required for those projects. So I think that will be a major challenge, because these are a real step up in the amount of defence engineering being done in Australia in these specialist areas. And of course defence always is looking for new technologies. They're looking for that competitive or capability edge, and that comes through technology. Well, one of the trends, if you like, Serge, is the nature of our engineering, and I think that it is evolving to be more at the smart end of technology, looking at new technologies, and not so much relying perhaps on large-scale manufacture. And we've seen that in industries like the motor car industry, for instance, where we've moved away from that. And so the challenge is to be able to be at the forefront of, or the real cutting edge of technology. One of the other challenges for the engineering profession is attracting women to the profession. And I think that with that shift to the more technology-based engineering jobs, there's greater scope for women to fill those positions, but it's still a real challenge for the profession to attract them there in the first place. And despite a lot of effort over the years, still only a relatively small proportion, I think it's around about 10 or 12% of engineers in Australia are women. So quite a low percentage compared to some other professions. Well, we're always looking for speakers who will be able to give presentations on state-of-the-art technologies or challenges that defence have. For instance, a few years ago we had a presentation on improvised explosive devices, which was of course a big challenge for the ADF in finding ways to combat those devices and minimise the damage that they cause. And so there was some interesting technology I guess initiatives to look at how those challenges might be addressed and solved, and it was very good to have a presentation which exposed those sort of challenges to a broader audience. So that's the sort of thing that ASDE can do to be able to alert defence industry, for instance, that defence has these sorts of problems and is actively looking for solutions.